We think about how we're doing that and we take what Justin just said. I mean, the workforce power has shifted to the employees, right? So as employers, we're still in
Mhm.
charge, we're still responsible, but we have, a supply and demand issue. That's the basic simplicity that we covered in the business trends review last week. Is it's a simple supply and demand, and there is not enough supply of people today for the amount of demand that we have. And that's creating an unbalance that we're not familiar with managing. Mikey, when I think about that unbalance and what we've seen occur over the last 4 years or so now with compensation, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about doing as we create a model within our organization to avoid this unbalance? We don't want to end up someplace one day and go, holy cow, how did we end up here? Look how inflated our wages are in comparison to the market.
Yeah, I think ever since COVID, uh, our compensation strategies have been kind of thrown away. And what most organizations have become are very reactive to what is going on with the supply and demand. And when, inflation was hitting us, and now we have other issues that we're dealing with, everyone seems to be forgetting that we used to have a very organized way of dealing with this, and that was a compensation strategy. We knew what the decisions that need to be made, what they are. We had a system in place so that we could then look at that and make decisions. We were able to identify our markets properly and be able to use that to update our structures. And then all of a sudden, the last few years, it's just like, oh, forget that. We're just throw money at it. And then what happens is, especially in our hiring strategies, we kept throwing more and more money at it. And then we forgot about our internal employees. So now we have employee satisfaction going down the drain because people are upset that, oh, you're more concerned about the new employees than me. You're
Yeah.
forgetting the idea that people want to improve and want to advance in their career. So we forget all about that because that's not in our strategy anymore. And so what's happened is that we need to I'm thinking about going back to the future type
Yeah.
of a mentality. We need to go back and kind of take a pause and say, well, wait a minute. We need to have more structure around this. We need to better define our strategy and have our system in place so that instead of being reactive, we know what decisions need to be made when certain circumstances occur and be more proactive around that. So
Mm.
that's what we're trying to get, especially working with your AIM members, getting them to rethink where we are and where we need to be going versus just throwing money at the problem.
Yeah. So you said a few things, Tanya. I'm going to warm that up for you in just a minute, but give you some food for thought here, Tanya. He talked about, the satisfaction is declining in the workplace, is something he said that I'm going to ask you to comment on. But Mike, when I think about, like when you're saying like go back to the future, we have this new space that we're in today in the future, that compensation used to be this thing that we could measure in whatever methodology that we used, but our employees had a limited view, right?
Right.
With they're before they could go on, now they can go online, but before they could go online, it was only a little bit of who I knew and maybe what I heard, and I couldn't validate things really well. And so, if I was paid what I thought was okay, I might have been more okay with the satisfier, and we talk about satisfiers of Herzberg, with my compensation. Where today, with transparency, and everything that brings compensation to the forefront, I know whether or not I'm paid competitively or not. And then I
Right.
can, what Tanya's going to talk about, I can weigh that against, my
Right.
workplace environment and decide, is it worth it or not?
Yeah, and
And
this
I have
is something.
options.
Yeah, this is something that I think employers have lost track of, and part of it is a generational issue. Before formalities of pay transparency, as we started having millennials and Gen Zs and now Gen Alpha coming into the workplace, they have a whole different perspective in terms of transparency. They always had transparency. They are in constant contact with each other, right?
Yeah.
They unlike boomers like me that I can't remember anybody I went to high school with. So, that's such a long time ago, but
Well,
they
that was
are,
a long time ago, Mikey.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know, a long time ago. And
Now, and I think Justin would tell us, that not only is it that social aspect of it, but there's
right,
that legal side of,
sure.
you can't even say today, hey,
Oh,
compensation is confidential. Let's not talk about it, or you're
sure.
at risk of losing your job.
Oh, in fact, in my earlier employers back in the late 70s, that was considered a trade secret and
Yeah,
confidential, your pay. So
yeah,
therefore, if you talked about pay, I would just say, "Oh, you were talking about it, you're fired."
yeah,
Obviously that changed, but with the changes in transparency, of course, have led to pay equity, right? Because the more I
right.
know about this, the more I'm going to challenge where am I being paid? Why am I being paid? And how do you know that this is competitive or not? So this also gets back into communication and how we have our managers and supervisors understanding how pay is put together in your organization, because that seems to be one of the biggest issues we are also facing, is that it's still a secret. And the main reason it's a secret is that supervisors and managers are lost. They don't understand it. So we haven't done a good job in our human resources and our leadership of being sure we bring our supervisors and managers along with us. However, in order to do that, we have to have that strategy. We have to have a system in place that we can then show our supervisors and managers, hey, there is an objective process here. It is not just somebody behind the curtain, coming up with
Right.
numbers. And so until we have that first step, even the communication becomes very difficult.
And I know what we want to promote here at AIM for all of our members is a strategy, something that you can pull out. When I say a strategy, people go, what do you mean a compensation strategy? I'm saying, like, this is our strategy. We want to pay at whatever percentile we're referring to. And I
Right,
always give the example that a lot of employers say, I want to pay at 50%. I'm like, that's okay. You can do that. I want to pay at the 50th percentile, but recognize that means I want to pay average.
right,
Right? That means if I'm going to pay average, I got to be better than average somewhere else. So
right,
where is that somewhere else that we're going to be better than average in?
right,
And then in our strategy, it's not like, well, I want to go out and have Mikey help us figure out, are we paying competitively today? And then I bury it away and I never dust it off and look at it again. And what the most effective organizations are doing in today's world, because it is an inflationary environment and it's changing rapidly, and to avoid the emotional response to compensation, you want to have a compensation model that says you're going to look at it at this time on this
right.
frequency, and here's how we're going to measure it. Teach our supervisors and managers that so they can explain it, and
That's
make
right.
sure that we're always in the position that we want to be in, and that we never find ourselves
That's right.
chasing the position we're trying to achieve. And once we get
Correct.
there, we just want to stay in that space. Then we want to focus on the things, Tanya, that you bring to the table. That's really around how we engage our workforce, to make it more of an environment people want to be. So Tanya, Michael said a few things around workplace satisfaction, and he said communication, and he used the engagement. When you're hearing those words, and you're looking at your survey results, and you're working with our AIM members, what is it that where do we start? What's the beginning process to getting into a model of we're going to create a better work environment?
Yeah, so I think exactly everything we've been talking about, I like to describe it as table stakes, right? We've got to satisfy those demotivators first to say we have that taken care of. And then just like we need data as we're doing our salary surveys, we need data about our culture and our environment. And I think one of the things that we have to start having a mind shift is away from an us and them mentality and into an ideology that our employees are stakeholders in the organization. Because when you talk to the younger members of the workplace, that is the way they view it. This is an exchange, goods, for pay and my time and all of those things. You are going to get my talent, and there's going to be an exchange here. And what they're asking for goes beyond that financial. And that's really where I think Herzberg and the things we measure in our employee engagement survey are really, really important. How supportive is my supervisor? Is there meaningfulness cultivated in the work that I do? And I mean that across all industries. Do I know that if I come in and I work on a particular machine all day, do I know where that part goes? Do I know where it ultimately impacts a customer or builds a road? And being able to bring that meaningfulness into the work is really, really important to create a culture that employees feel like they're part of something more. And what we know from the research is when we satisfy those motivators, feeling like I'm accomplishing something, feeling like I have accountability and responsibility, I can advance through my career, that's when retention happens. And so much of what we saw come out of that business trend survey was around recruitment and retention and pay. And I am here advocating, saying those are going to become less and less important if we can truly satisfy what employees are looking for. We increase engagement, retention is going to follow. So you know me, if you've listened to this show, I'm always about root causes. And I feel like in a lot of ways, we're talking about the reactive things that are happening because we haven't fixed what's broken underneath.
Yeah. So Tanya, how does an organization take the first steps to get started? So let's just paint the picture. All right. Hey, I'm working with Mikey. He's helping us build a compensation model that we're going to practice continuously. Measurement,
Yep.
adjustments, measurements, adjustments all the time. So we're staying in space. Now I want to get started on these motivating factors that you work on so diligently. How do I get started in something like that? Where do I start?
The first thing you've got to decide is who's going to be accountable in your organization to be monitoring and measuring that, and that's your frontline supervisors. Are they empowered to talk about these things? Are they empowered to really have two-way communication? Do they have the skills to know how to do that? Are they able to meet with their teams? Are their teams and the entire employment base, do they have the communication skills that they need to have conversations beyond just give and receive, right? We're actually talking and communicating. And do they have those tactics? And so what we're seeing time and time again on the surveys is employees are saying communication is suffering in our organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk to leadership, and leadership does this. What do they want? I don't know what they want. We send emails, we send text messages. I joke and I'm like, no, send carrier pigeons to their home. But that's all in jest. Where communication happens is that frontline supervisor. Who do I go to get information about the organization, to know what my roles are, to ask for tools and training and development if I need them? And that is where we need to be making the biggest investment, because we know that supervisor is critical to employees staying.
Sure.
And what we see time and time again in these surveys is we're not investing in that level of the organization, or we don't have expectations clarified at the very top of the organization so that we can tool and empower those supervisors to do the work that we need them to do.
Yeah, I know one of the things that when I'm talking with employers, I'll use the example is, and you said table stakes, right? And what I find is, this is an all-in movement on developing these first line supervisors and managers more than we've ever experienced before, because that is where the rubber does hit the road. It's my boss encourages me, supports me, develops me, or communicates with me or doesn't. It's just that simple, right? It's yes or no. It's we're there. And Mikey, you mentioned something last week I want to come back to. So Tanya's talking about my supervisor can answer and give me this information. But we grew up in a day where, management would work with a consultant or their compensation team, which we don't have compensation teams much anymore, to develop a pay rate, an increase, whatever it might be. And then we would execute it, but we never really communicated that down the line. And now you're finding yourself, Mike, working with first-line supervisors and explaining the compensation model so that message can get explained down by the person who's going to be the most impactful in that retention effort. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing there, Mike.
Well, I think what we're starting to learn, and again going back to where we were, is that when an employee is concerned about their compensation, let's just start with that. It's not like in the old days, we'll go talk to HR. You
Right.
know, the supervisor would just take a pass, right? I'm not going to deal with that. The problem is that the number one person that the employee really relies on in order to have some trust that the system is working is their first line supervisor. That's the person they're going to go to and say, hey, do you get this? And is it fair? I don't
Right.
understand what's going on. And so we still are finding that we have organizations where the supervisors just throw up their hands and say, I have no idea, go talk to HR. Well, as soon as they do that, that's it. We've lost that opportunity. The other thing that's starting to happen, though, is because as we're looking at different strategies, especially for engagement, is the whole issue of career progression and career pathing within the system. And we're designing a lot of pay systems with that in mind. The problem is, while we can do that from a system standpoint, it's how you implement that, because career progression and career pathing requires a supervisor to work with that employee on a regular basis to help them in terms of how they will advance in that career progression, which is very positive for engagement, except it scares the heck out of these supervisors because now they have to talk to their employees on a regular basis, and they're sometimes just not prepared for that. So
Right.
all of these things are coming together, and really, it really is the cornerstone of a successful
We may have lost
implementation of any
Tanya.
strategy or first line supervisor.
Tanya, real quick, you look like you want to say something there, so I want to invite you in, but otherwise I had a good
Yeah,
question for you. Go right ahead.
yeah, no, I just want to say the survey results tell us the same thing. Employees tell us time and time again that they are rating well under 60% positive to the statement, I know how my pay is determined. So employees don't know that information, and we know that that is a first line driver for engagement. And so I just want to double down on what Michael's saying, that this is really, really important. And again, supervisors are scared of this. What did Michael say earlier in the conversation? If you asked Al about pay, I could just fire you.
Yeah.
Right? That was a time of pensions. That was a time where you worked for the organization and you as the employee didn't have to be invested in your financial future. We are in a different time now. People are responsible for their own 401ks, understanding all of that. So it's natural that employees want to understand how their pay is determined. And we need to determine as organizations who's holding that, right? And what we know right now is it's frontline supervisors, and we're simply not giving them the tools to adequately have those conversations and really feel empowered and well-tooled to do so.
I tell you what, I can talk about this all day. I think exactly, I'm exactly aligned with what you're both saying. And I know Justin's in the background going, hey, and don't forget, it's legally very important to allow people the space, if they choose to engage in these conversations about compensation under asserted, concerted activity and other things like that. So it is a different day, right? We know we have to have a model. We don't want to be chasing a compensation model, and we have to be working on these motivators that I know Tanya is working on every single day. When you put Michael and Tanya together and you take that approach, you're going to give yourself a better chance at creating a workplace that has the retention object, or that can achieve the retention objectives that you want to achieve. Give it some thought, think it over, talk with your AIM advisor. Michael and Tanya are always here, and they're happy to chat with you as well.